So hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio and my YouTube channel. And I am super excited to be joined by the fantastically talented Charlene White. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Matthew.
Now, obviously, the last year has been complete madness. So for you, how have you coped with the ever-changing situation we find ourselves in, the many lockdowns? I mean, you've still been able to do work, so that must be quite good to be able to still get out and do something.
Yeah, I always sort of say to people that I feel very lucky and very blessed that I get to wake up every morning and go into an office, and see a handful of my colleagues and still have some semblance of normality in that way. Because for so many other people who are working from home, it's been a real shock and a real change and quite isolating. So I do feel like I'm quite lucky that I do get to see the wonderful people that I work with every day on a daily basis.
I imagine that in the early stages of lockdown, things changed quite considerably within, working in an office. I mean, how did that change for you?
You know what? I was actually still on maternity leave when lockdown first happened, and my other half had been on paternity leave for about 4 months by that point. So in terms of us all being together and adjusting to us all being at home every day, there was no real change for us because we've been doing it since December the year previously. But obviously what did change is we then weren't able to see friends and family, we weren't able to do play dates. So it did take a lot of adjusting in that way. And we'd had this whole plan for maternity and paternity to take my eldest to lots of museums and galleries and Peppa Pig World and all these different things that we'd had planned to really make use of our paternity and maternity leave. And then we weren't able to do any of those things. And then with knowing so many people who've been affected by COVID, it then became really, really hard. But at the start of it, as everyone was getting used to having to be together, we were a bit like, well, this has kind of been our normal for months now, so we're quite used to it.
I mean, the other amazing thing is that, it has given people time to kind of reflect on things and look after themselves. I mean, I imagine having a child, that doesn't give you much time to relax and sort of look after your mental health so much. But, it must be quite a strange time to have a child in just the weird situation we're in.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend about this last week, actually, because for my eldest, who's 3.5 now, he remembers what life was like before now, and he often talks about it. And when people used to be able to come to the house and going to see family and all of that, he remembers all of that. Whereas Florence, who's 1.5 years, this is her normal. So not having people come to the house is very normal for her. She doesn't know what it's like to do play dates. She doesn't know what soft play even is. She doesn't know what a trampoline park is. She doesn't know what any of those things are. Music classes, for example, baby massage, all of that stuff. She has never done. So the isolation type scenario is her normal. So it's going to be quite a change for her when life goes back to some semblance of normality to discover all of these things. And that's quite a weird scenario to be in, really. And we moved house the summer before lockdown kicked in, and in my head, I'd be able to get to know all these new mums because I'll be able to do all of these baby classes and music classes that I did with Alfie, and not being able to do any of those things. That's been quite it's been quite hard, I think, because I wasn't able to build up a network of new mums and baby friends for Florence. I wasn't able to do any of those things. And so I've had to find other ways to make friends locally in a new environment, which has felt a little bit like being at school, really, and trying to find people to be my friend. But luckily, I've met some really wonderful women and some other wonderful parents, just through going to the park and stuff with my eldest. So that's helped. But I know for other women where this has been their first baby, and having had their first baby during lockdown, they have found it incredibly isolating, and haven't really had the wonderful experience of maternity leave that those of us who've had kids before have been able to enjoy. And I do really feel for them.
I mean, the one thing that is a positive to come out of, you know, the many lockdowns that we found ourselves in is obviously the fact that things like Skype and Zoom, we can still connect with people. We can still see each other like we're doing now on Zoom. You can still, you know, talk to people, and it's not quite the same as being in the same room as someone, but at the same time, you can still talk to people. You can see them. You can. Sort of more or less like you're in a room with someone in a way, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think what one thing that's been wonderful is technology. And you know, I'm talking to you from the office because I'm on lunchtime news. And what's the time now? 11 o'clock. I'm on lunchtime news in a couple of hours. If we had to do this in person, I probably, you know, we would not be able to do this right now. Because if I were to come to you or to come to your studio, I wouldn't be able to because I've got to do lunchtime. And that's been the wonderful thing to come out of all of this, I think, is we've really in a very short space of time learned how to use technology far more effectively. You know, because, you know, we dinosaurs, and I don't like referring to myself as that, but I think technology wise, we like doing things the way we've always done them. And you know, our world has been opened up in the last year, that this has become our normal, talking on Zoom, and you from home and me from the office. It's opened up a whole new world of opportunities where communication is concerned, and I've loved that side of it, because I've been able to, what I try to do on a Friday is do things like this, and to be able to donate, not, I hate using the phrase donate my time, but being able to give back in a way that I perhaps wouldn't have been able to before, because I can shoehorn things like this into my day, and I've really enjoyed it. And I have met, you know, I do lots of other outside of work stuff with charities a lot, but I've been able to do so much more over the past year because I've been able to do it from home or do it from the office, and it's been really nice.
I mean, the other thing, of course, that has come through from the pandemic is the appreciation for the NHS, the National Health Service, any key workers out there. I mean, I think they were maybe a little bit underappreciated before now, but I think they've come back to the forefront of our minds. So, I mean, for you, how have you found, you know, obviously when we did the clapping for the carers, and what has your opinion been of the NHS since everything that's kicked off?
Well, I think I'm most definitely not one of those people who underappreciated the NHS in any shape or form. The NHS has always been there for my family, and it's always been there for my friends. And I have family members and friends who have worked in the NHS their entire lives. I, like many other families, especially within London, but across the UK, many families, just like myself, have been impacted by COVID. And I lost family members during the first wave. And have been, touch wood, not impacted family wise during this wave. But my gosh, my friends have. I've had countless, and I mean countless, number of friends who lost parents as a result of this over the past year. Just last week, one of my son's friends at nursery, his grandfather died as a result of COVID just last week. Another friend of mine lost their father just last week. I had friends who lost parents over Christmas. I had friends who lost parents during the autumn, over the summer, and I just sort of feel a little bit like, especially those of us who live in London, I feel a little bit like so many of us have been surrounded by death and grief and loss, and it has been awful. But one thing that I am definitely thankful for when my aunt passed during the first wave is those nurses who were on the ward, who made sure that we were constantly updated, who held her hand when it needed to be held, who allowed my cousins to go and be there in full PPE as she was going. You know, those nurses and doctors have had to give love to complete strangers when their loved ones have not been there for them. And I, like many other families across the country, will just be forever grateful for that.
And the fact that so many of them have had to give up their own lives, you know, had to, you know, go into temporary accommodation, or even move into, you know, the care homes or wherever they're working. And they've not seen their own kids, their own families for, you know, since the whole thing started. So, I mean, just, you know, hats off, you know, applause to them all.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not one who has ever been one for underappreciating the joy and love and fabulousness that is the NHS. We're in a really lucky situation here where we have a service that is available to us without us having to fork out thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds to be treated. And that is a wonderful thing when you look elsewhere in the world, in the States, for example, where the poorest of society isn't able to get the care that they need during a global pandemic because they're not able to afford it. We are lucky that we do not have that situation here. You know, and if anyone dare to really underappreciate the wonderfulness that is the NHS, well, shame on them, really.
Now, we must talk about one of your newest projects, which you've been working on recently, and that is, of course, Loose Women. So for you to join the Loose Women team, what has that been like? Because it looks like you're having a blast. You're doing a great job on the show. So, I mean, how have you found it, you know, settling in?
Thank you. Very kind words, Matthew. Thank you. I mean, some people sort of said, God, it's such a change from being on the news, but I don't really see it that way. It's news packaged in a slightly different box, really. And I think anyone who knows me or anyone that sees me doing interviews on Lunchtime News or doing it on ITV News London knows that I love a chat. You know, when Sally Williams is in the studio with me doing the weather, we love a bit of a chat and a bit of a catch up. And for me, doing Loose is just an extension of that. And I get to work with, my goodness, such a fabulous group of women every single day I do that job. And they are all just wonderful, and they have been so open and so welcoming, and I'm having a ball. Honestly, I'm having an absolute blast, and it just doesn't feel like work in the same way that when I come in here and I work with such an incredible team, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like I get to go and hang out with just brilliant people and have a bit of a laugh and a joke and have debates and have discussions in a way that I would with my friends anyway. And especially at the moment where I'm not able to do that with my friends in the flesh, but I get to go into that Loose Women studio and chat to new friends and have great discussions and hopefully bring a little slice of joy to people at lunchtime during a period of what has been a lot of darkness, really.
I mean, when you had your first appearance on Loose Women, did you know that they were going to ask you back permanently? And how did you feel? Were you nervous? You know, how were you feeling for it?
Oh my goodness me, I was so nervous. I was so nervous. I couldn't sleep the night before. I couldn't at all. I was just so nervous and so excited and just wanted it to go right. And it's like the first day at school. I just wanted them to like me, and thankfully they did. And you know, gosh, so many things I've written in the paper about, you know, when you get a group of women that work together, people are, it's almost like people are just desperate for them not to get along, because there is this whole idea that you put a group of women together, there'll be, for want of a better word, there'll be a lot of cat fighting, a lot of infighting, and it hasn't been that at all. They have honestly been wonderful, and I feel really lucky to be able to be surrounded by such wonderful women every day.
And also, you have to be very open on that show. I mean, one of my guests earlier on in the series was the lovely Denise Welsh, and she's obviously been very open about her depression over the years. So, I mean, is there a kind of sort of a nervousness about having to be so open? I mean, are you quite an open person?
Look, there is nothing on Loose that I talk about that I haven't spoken about before. You know, the pictures that are shown are pictures that are freely available on my Instagram and on my Twitter. And I've always been very honest about talking about the realities of being a working parent, the realities of how difficult life can be while juggling 2 under 3.5 during a pandemic, and how me and my other half were able to sort of deal with that and navigate that. You know, I'm honest about things, but I am also quite closed about other things. You know, and I think I'm able to sort of strike that balance quite well on the show, because, you know, the reality of it is I like people to understand that, you know, the struggles that parents deal with in terms of sleeping properly, them having, you know, paddies every now and then because they're not able to see their friends, you know, all of that stuff are the stuff that my kids and my family go through as well. You know, my kids missing their grandparents, me missing being able to hang out with my sister and my brother and my stepsisters and stuff. You know, all of that stuff. I'm going through exactly the same thing, and I like viewers to know that there isn't that detachment in that way. You know, like I'll constantly post up pictures online of me with no makeup on. I really don't care. This is just me.
And I mean, the other amazing thing as well is that you get to, you know, speak to amazing people, you know, all over the world, really, with Loose Women. Is there a dream guest, someone you would love to interview who you've never had the chance to interview before?
Oh my goodness me. I've been lucky that throughout, because I've lived such a varied career, you know, my biggest idol I was able to speak to before she passed away, and that was Maya Angelou, because I grew up reading her books. And I was really, really lucky that whilst I was working for BBC Radio 1, I got to interview her. And that was such a huge moment for me, and possibly the most nervous I have been interviewing anyone ever. And I was so lucky to be in her presence, and she was just as wonderful as I knew she would be. One of my music idols, Jay-Z, I was able to interview when I was at Radio 1 as well, and that was also a huge moment for me. At this particular moment in time, on my current list, would be, you know, Kamala Harris, I'd love to talk to. Michelle Obama, I would love to talk to. You know, Beyonce, I'd love a sit down with her. That would be just incredible. So the list is long and it's ever growing. And I really, really hope that, be it here at Item News or over at Loose Women, I would love to have the opportunity to interview, you know, a whole range of just fabulous women.
Now, where did the interest in broadcast and, you know, journalism, where did that start for you? Do you remember the first time that you thought, this is what I want to do for a job?
Yeah, because I wanted to be a lawyer until I was 16. My mum was very much you might be too young for this, Matthew, but my mum was very much a fan of LA law. She loved thrillers. And so I wanted to be like fighting for justice, and, you know, fighting for, you know, those whose voices tend to be quieter and aren't always heard. And my uncle was jailed for something that he didn't do, and I just sort of felt that being a lawyer was the way forward for me in terms of speaking out for others. But then I went on my law work experience in Croydon Crown Court and fell asleep because it was just so boring. And I realised that it's not the same as it is on the panel. So I thought, actually, maybe this isn't the path I go down. And you know, newspapers, news programs were a daily constant in my life, because, you know, my family were forever keeping across what was happening in current affairs. My dad taught me to read in the front of the Guardian newspaper, for example. So I thought, actually, maybe that's the way that I impact the world and speak for those whose voices tend to be quieter. And that's how I ended up going down the journalism route. I always knew I wanted to be a broadcaster rather than print, but at uni I did a print journalism course, because I felt if you have a print foundation, the broadcast side of it can come after that. You can learn to be a broadcaster, but for me, the fundamentals were in print journalism, and that's what I decided to concentrate on, and then learn to be a broadcaster after that. And yeah, it's gone all right so far, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, is there someone that you looked up to when you were younger that you thought, I'd love to be like them or have a career similar to them?
Yeah, I grew up on a diet of Maurice Stewart and Trevor McDonald, who I adored and still adore, and sort of wanted to get to their dizzy heights. And also there's a broadcaster called Soledad O'Brien who used to broadcast for CNN. And I also grew up on a diet of her as well. And the sorts of stories she told and the style in which she tells those stories are very much in tune with how I wanted to broadcast. I've always been one that felt like I wanted to be a news broadcaster that evoked empathy, because for me, I naturally empathize with people, and I didn't want to lose that as a broadcaster, and I didn't want to be perceived to be cold. I wanted to perceive, you know, I am warm by nature, and I didn't see why I should get rid of that just because I wanted to do news. And Soledad O'Brien does that really, really well. And Anderson Cooper, I think, does that really well on CNN. And that's why I thought, actually, I think I want to go down more that route. If they can do it, I felt that I could do it too by not losing that part of me.
Now, obviously, being a journalist, you have to deal with so many different types of stories. Stories that maybe don't directly affect you, but you still want to tell the story. But then at the same time, you can get stories like COVID that it affects everyone. And I must imagine when you're first, kind of talking about these stories that do affect everyone, even affect maybe yourself, it must be a bit panicky because you sort of think, I've got to obviously present this professionally, but at the same time, I'm thinking, oh, this could affect me, this could affect my family.
I always like to think as journalists we have really cold hearts, so we don't have to get emotional on air. But I think we've all had those moments in the last year where there have been stories or interviews or situations which have really hit us. And I remembered there was an Anne Finely, probably in the autumn or summer last year, where we had spoken to a lot of key workers and frontline workers, and also spoken to families who had lost loved ones as a result of the pandemic. And we had it as an Anne Finely on Evening News. I remember it was like a 2.5 minute package, or maybe a 1:45 package. And from the moment it started, I just couldn't talk. And I do a lot of talking. So when viewers are seeing packages or films being broadcast, I'm forever chatting. When it's on air, I'm chatting to the director in my ear, I'm chatting to the PA in my ear, or I'm chatting to my floor manager or the cameraman, constantly chatting, because that's how I keep my energy levels up. And it's just quite nice, really. But during that, I couldn't talk, so I knew if I opened up my mouth, I'd start crying. And because it hit me, and it reminded me of my great aunt. My best friend's mum died during the first wave, and the stories that this particular Anne Finely was telling really hit home, and I just couldn't talk. And I think the team that I work with here are very good at reading presenters' emotions, but also very good at reading my emotions as well, because I am naturally always happy, always bubbly, always cracking jokes. That's just me by nature. And if there's any moment when I suddenly go quiet, it'll be because I'm being impacted by something. And people always know that, and they'll just leave me to have my moment. And I remember it playing, and I was thinking, I can't talk. If I talk, I'll cry. And if I cry, I won't be able to stop by the time I have to say goodbye at the end of the program. So I was just like deathly quiet, watching these stories being told, people sharing their memories. And then it finished, and I just had to take a breath, and then did my normal goodbye. And I think there were a few viewers who sort of tweeted and said, I could see you were really emotional at the end of that. And we all have those moments. We are human beings. We are not just telling a story. We are telling a story that we are impacted by every day. I mean, there are some people here who are incredibly, incredibly lucky that they've not been personally impacted by COVID. I am unfortunately not one of those people. I've been impacted in it from the very, very, very first moment that this kicked off here. And I have continued to be impacted by it throughout it. And every week I sort of sit there and go, I catch up with a friend, and it's like, right, it's happened again, yet again, yet again. And that does make me angry sometimes because of the unfairness of it. And it's the knowledge of the fact that I'm an ethnic minority, and ethnic minorities, especially Black and South Asian communities, are unfortunately more impacted by this. So as a result, I then know more people that have not only been impacted by it, but have died as a result. And there is a part of me that's become quite numb to it. And I think there are quite a few of us who are numb to it, but all it means is later on down the line that delayed grief will kick in. I know that. I know that for myself, and I know that for family members, and I know that for friends, that there is a massive, massive wave of delayed grief that are going to hit so many of us. When that will happen, I don't know. Will it happen when things go back to normal? I don't know. But I know that we haven't been able to grieve properly. Within our communities, you grieve when you are amongst massive groups of people. You know, my mum's funeral had like a DJ and caterer. I mean, we would dance the night away to the early hours of the morning because that's how we grieve. And that's like how we get it all out. We dance, we eat, we drink, we chat, we laugh, we cry, we do all of that stuff. When that is then taken away from you, the grieving process is unfinished. So, you know, I do believe that there's a big wave of grief coming. And you know, I just hope that we're all able to deal with that, really.
I mean, that's the thing is, us as human beings, we are social creatures. We like to interact. We have to talk. If we don't talk, we bottle it up, and it just gets worse. So you have to talk.
Yeah, and I've always been a big believer in talking about grief. Like I talk a lot. Anyone who's sort of read articles about me talking about my mum and what have you, I'm very open with talking about grief because I think it's important. And I think as society, as Brits, we do find it uncomfortable sometimes to talk about grief. But this is a very big moment for us to not deal with grief in that way. We have to share our grief because it's important. And for those of us who've been surrounded by it for the last year, it's so important that we talk about it, because the impact of not talking, and so many of us not talking, just doesn't really bear thinking about, really.
Now, I mean, you have had an amazing career. Is there a proud, like a moment in your career that's been one of the proudest moments, something that you've really been proud of and looked up to? You know, what would you say is your proudest moment in your career?
Oh gosh, I would say definitely News at 10. I mean, my dad was able to then, you know, go into, because he was a postman before he retired, to go into the sorting office, and have his friends go, oh, I saw your daughter on News at 10 last night. And my dad is quite a quiet person by nature. Me and my sister are more like my aunt. We're very open, and we're very loud, and we love a chat. My dad is quite quiet and quite reserved. And he said that to me. He sort of says, oh, but you know, the guys at work were talking about, you know, you being on News at 10 last night. And that's like his way of sort of saying, oh, I'm really proud. You know, I'm a child of immigrants, so whatever makes my dad proud, and whatever he doesn't shout from the rooftops about stuff, because that's just not who he is. But I know those moments when he is super proud, and the fact that he came over here to a country that on a whole rejected him, for him to then be able to have that moment of seeing me doing News at 10 was a huge moment. And you know, when my mum was alive and I had my first job as a trainee working at ITV Meridian down in Maidstone, so embarrassing. On my first day as a trainee, she then sends a massive bunch of flowers in the studio, like this huge bunch of flowers. So I'd gone out to go get some lunch, came back, and on my desk was this massive bunch of flowers. And I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. I mean, lovely, obviously, but oh my God, this is just, I was mortified. But also proud, because it was such a proud moment for her and for my parents, that, you know, my very first job, full-time job, working as a trainee at ITV, it was huge. And she obviously wants to say, you know, I am so proud of you. But perhaps on my first day, when I'm trying to sort of, you know, make a really good impression of this massive bunch of flowers, like, oh my God, you're so embarrassing. But it was a really, really proud moment for her. And I'm really pleased that she was alive to see that.
Now, I just want to say it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. But before we go, is there any messages you'd like to give to anyone who is currently stuck in hospital at the moment?
Oh, if you know, I've done a hospital stint myself a couple of times for a long time. And I know it can sometimes seem, I don't know, quite bleak and quite dark and just horrible. But you're in the best possible hands being within the NHS. You really, really are. And we are all going through, oh gosh, just, you know, an awful time. But there is always light at the end of the tunnel. And those doctors and nurses that pop to your bedside every now and then, you know, they are there to bring joy as well. I mean, to use a Marie Kondo phrase, sorry, Marie Kondo, they are there to spark joy as well. You know, and I just hope this has given you, I don't know, a little bit of a boost. I really, really do. And if you're at your hospital bed and and the TV's there in front of you, and I happen to be on there on Loose Women or ITV News, if I smile today, think that I'm giving you your own little personal smile from the TV screen. You know, none of us wants to sort of do a hospital stay, but if you are there, you really are in the best possible hands. And if you are a frontline worker, an NHS worker that's also listening into this little session, just thank you. A big, great, massive, sloppy thank you, and hug, and sending you lots of lockdown love, really.
Thank you so much, Charlene. It's been an absolute pleasure. Of course, keep safe. Thank you again for your time, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
And sending hugs your way as well, Matthew.